He thought he'd lost everything, a quiet life on the edge of nowhere, a family torn apart by tragedy. But 3 years later, on a dusty bus rolling through the unforgiving plains, he heard a voice that shattered his world. The song of twin daughters he believed were gone forever. What he found that day didn't just break his heart, it shattered his entire life before it even began. Wherever you're watching this story from, let us know in the comments below. And if these kinds of stories move you, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more. Now, settle in, this is a journey you won't forget. They say a man's courage is tested when the dust rises on the horizon. For me, it happened at dawn. I was standing at the edge of my father's field, the air still cold from the night, when I saw the first line of riders crest the ridge. Then the second. Then the third. By the time the sun broke over the hills, there were hundreds, 300, maybe more, stretching from one end of the valley to the other. The ground trembled under their horses. My hand found the old Colt on my hip, though I knew damn well it wasn't enough. Not against this. The smell hit me first, a mixture of sweat, leather, and something darker. The kind of smell that told you these men had been on the trail for blood, not cattle. Their banners were black, torn, stitched with a symbol I didn't recognize. I counted the seconds between the pounding hooves and my heartbeat. They were closing fast. That's when I heard her voice again, as clear as it had been the night before. If they find you, they'll burn it all. The memory cut through me like a blade. I saw her face in the firelight, sharp, desperate, eyes darting to the door. The night had been full of wind and thunder, the barn shaking under the storm. She had come in drenched, her hands trembling as she passed me a rolled piece of paper wrapped in oilskin. "Don't open it here," she'd said. "Not yet. And for God's sake, don't trust anyone who smiles at you in the morning." Then she was gone. No horse, no sound of boots on the road, just gone. I blinked, and the riders were closer now, their leader at the front, a tall man with a silver-handled revolver and a coat that dragged through the dust. He raised one hand, and the entire army slowed to a crawl. My breath caught. Because behind him, tied to the back of his saddle, was the same woman from last night, her face hidden, her hands bound. And in that moment, I understood two things. First, that she had lied to me. Second, that whatever was in that oilskin paper was worth killing for. I didn't move. Not when the tall man's horse stepped forward, not when the iron bit clinked in its mouth, not even when his shadow stretched over my boots. My fingers stayed loose on the Colt, though my heart was ready to punch its way through my ribs. The woman was still slumped against his saddle, hair tangled, dress torn at the hem. Her head swayed with each step of the horse, but I couldn't tell if she was conscious. Every instinct I had screamed to run to her, to cut her free. But in the West, instincts could get you killed quicker than bullets. The tall man's eyes found mine, gray, cold, unblinking. He was the kind of man who didn't just kill, he decided how you would die. He leaned forward in the saddle, his voice like gravel under a boot. "You're Holden, ain't you?" I didn't answer. Not yet. The way he said my name felt wrong, like a snake saying it had a gift for you. "I've been told you got something belongs to me." My hand twitched near the Colt. "I don't take things that don't belong to me." His smile was thin, like a knife's edge. "Then you won't mind handin' over what you don't have." Behind him, the army of riders fanned out, horses stamping, saddles creaking. They weren't just outlaws, at least not in the usual sense. Their gear didn't match, but each man wore a strip of black cloth somewhere on his body. Tied to the arm, wrapped around the neck, braided into the hair. It was a mark, a warning. I'd seen something like it before. Years back, in the mining town of Red Hollow, when a crew rode through and left the place burning behind them. Folks called them the Marked. Some said they worked for the railroad barons, others that they were ghosts of the Confederacy still riding long after the war had ended. Truth was, nobody really knew. And now they were here. "What's in the bundle?" the tall man asked. I said nothing. His eyes flicked to one of his men, and the rider stepped forward, a shotgun balanced across his lap. I weighed my chances. 1 Colt, 6 bullets. 300 of them. Not good. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't dare turn my back on the riders, but I knew who it was by the sound. Boots with a slight limp, the uneven rhythm like a slow heartbeat. Elias Kane. He'd been my father's foreman for nearly 20 years, until Pa died and Elias started looking at me like I was a problem that needed solving. "Morning, Holden," Elias said, coming to stand beside me. His hand rested on the butt of his rifle, but there was no friendliness in his tone. "I see you've made some friends." "They ain't mine," I said. The tall man's gaze shifted between us. "Then maybe you'll tell me where the paper is." Paper. He didn't even pretend not to know. Elias glanced at me, his eyes narrowing. "What paper?" I felt the weight of the oilskin bundle inside my coat. If I told Elias, it'd be in this man's hands before nightfall. If I didn't, I might not see the sun again. "I don't have it," I lied. The tall man's smile didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "Search him." 2 riders swung down from their horses, boots crunching in the dust. I stepped back, my hand closing on the Colt, ready to draw, when a shot rang out. It wasn't mine. The rider to my left jerked back, blood spraying from his shoulder. His shotgun hit the ground, and the horses screamed. From somewhere up on the ridge, another shot cracked, then another. The marked scattered, some pulling their mounts toward cover, others drawing their weapons and firing blind into the hills. The tall man didn't flinch. His voice cut through the chaos. "Find that shooter. Bring me his head." Elias and I backed toward the barn, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Who the hell?" Elias started. "I don't know," I said. But I did know. At least, I thought I did. There was only one person I'd ever met who could shoot like that from that kind of distance. And she'd been dead for 4 years. The third shot split the air before the marked could regroup. A man pitched sideways out of his saddle, dust puffing up around his twitching legs. The tall man turned in his saddle, his voice a low growl. "Get to the ridge." Half the riders broke away, spurring their horses hard toward the rocky slope. Their gunfire cracked and ricocheted, but whoever was up there didn't stop. A 4th shot clipped a horse's bridle, sending the beast rearing and throwing its rider to the ground. Elias shoved me toward the barn's side door. "Move, Holden." I didn't argue. Bullets chewed into the boards as we ducked inside, the smell of hay and old wood wrapping around me like a memory I didn't want. We crouched in the shadows, listening to the chaos outside. Elias peered through a gap in the wall, jaw tight. "They're not shooting at you," he said, almost like it surprised him. "They're not shooting at you either," I replied. Elias gave me a sideways look. "Maybe they don't need to." I ignored him and worked my way to the loft ladder. The barn's upper window faced the ridge. If I was right about who was up there, I needed to see for myself. When I reached the window, I pulled my hat low against the glare and squinted toward the hills. There, just below the ridgeline, a flicker of movement. Someone lying prone, rifle braced against a rock. Even from this distance, the shape of the weapon told me enough. Long barrel, custom stock, weathered but cared for. My throat tightened. There'd been only one rifle like that in this part of the territory, and it had been buried along with its owner in the Red Valley Cemetery. But the way the shooter moved, calm, efficient, sliding a fresh round into the chamber, there was no mistaking it. It was her. Nora Black. 4 years ago, I'd watched her vanish into the smoke of a burning freight depot, a gun in each hand, blood soaking her side. She was supposed to be dead before morning. I'd even seen the grave. A fresh volley from the marked forced her to roll deeper into cover. She returned fire, the crack of her rifle punching clean through the noise. Another rider dropped. I didn't know whether to run toward her or stay hidden. If the marked caught her, it'd be over. If they caught me with her, it'd be worse. Elias's voice drifted up from below. "You see who it is?" I didn't answer. Because right then, the barn door exploded inward. The tall man stepped in first, ducking under the splintered frame, gray eyes locked on me up in the loft. Two of his men followed, shotguns leveled. "You've got 10 seconds, he said, to hand over that paper before this place becomes your coffin." I glanced toward the ridge. Nora was shifting positions, probably counting her own shots. She couldn't cover me forever. My hand went inside my coat. "Careful," the tall man warned. I pulled the oilskin bundle halfway out, enough for him to see it. His eyes narrowed. That told me all I needed to know. Whatever was inside mattered more to him than the woman he had tied to his saddle. Elias stepped forward, his voice calm but edged. "You get that paper, and you're gone. Leave the rest of us be." The tall man looked at him, then at me. "Deal?" I almost laughed. There were no deals with men like him. The next second proved me right. A shot shattered one of the barn's back windows. One of the tall man's men crumpled. I dropped from the loft ladder, rolling into cover as gunfire erupted from both sides. Horses screamed outside, boots thundered, and the air filled with dust and cordite. Elias grabbed my arm. "We've got to move now." I yanked free. "She's out there. She's already dead." Elias snarled. I ignored him and bolted through the side door, keeping low. Bullets hissed past my ears. I sprinted toward the slope, heart hammering, the bundle heavy inside my coat. When I reached the base of the ridge, a hand shot out from behind a boulder and dragged me into the shadows. It was her. Nora Black. Her hair was shorter, her face leaner, but her eyes were the same, sharp, calculating, impossible to read. She pressed her rifle into my chest. "Holden," she said, like we'd just spoken yesterday. "You're supposed to be dead." "Yeah. Guess I'm bad at staying that way." I stared at her, 100 questions boiling up, but before I could speak, she jerked her head toward the barn. "They want the map. You give it to them. You might as well start digging your own grave." "Map. So that's what the paper was. What's it lead to?" I asked. Her eyes flicked down the slope toward the marked regrouping. "Something worth killing the whole damn territory for." The air on the ridge felt sharper, colder, as if the wind itself knew what was about to happen. Nora crouched low, scanning the barnyard through the scope of her rifle. Down below, the marked were pulling back, not retreating, just regrouping. "They're not leaving," I said. "They will," she murmured. "Once they've got what they came for. Or once there's nothing left alive to stop them." Her tone wasn't guesswork. It was certainty. I looked at her again, trying to reconcile the woman beside me with the ghost I'd buried in my head. 4 years, Nora. For years I thought you were under dirt. Her cheek brushed the stock of her rifle as she tracked movement. 4 years I was hunting something bigger than the men who put me there. A flash of red caught her scope. She fired once, one clean shot, and a man dropped in the dust 30 yards from the barn. She didn't even watch him fall. "You've still got that paper?" she asked. I patted my coat. "Don't let it out of your hands," she said. "Not even for me." Before I could ask why, the sound came, low at first, like a distant storm. Then louder. Hoofbeats. Many of them. From the south, a second group of riders poured into view. They weren't wearing the Mark's pale dusters, but black oilskin coats, faces wrapped in scarves. Their saddles were hung with rifles and machetes. "Reinforcements," I said. Nora's lips tightened. "No. Different crew. Worse." The two groups didn't clash. They slowed, circled each other like wolves, and then the tall man rode forward to meet the leader of the new arrivals. "They know each other," I muttered. "They're trading," Nora said, lowering her rifle. "What?" "They'll make a deal. Information for bodies. Or the other way around." I watched the two leaders talk, their horses shifting in the dust. The tall man gestured toward the barn. The black-coated rider tilted his head, then looked up toward the ridge. "Right at us." "Time to move," Nora said. We slipped along the ridge's backside, keeping low. My boots found loose shale, sending tiny slides of rock skittering downhill. Each sound felt like a shout in the still air. We followed a narrow animal trail down into a gully choked with sage and thornbrush. The sun was sliding lower, throwing long shadows over the land. At the gully's far end, a weathered shack leaned against the slope. Its door hung open, banging softly in the wind. Nora pushed it aside and motioned me in. Inside, it smelled of dust, gun oil, and something older, leather maybe, or dried blood. Maps covered one wall. Old, yellowed, hand-drawn. Some marked with crude symbols. "You've been busy," I said. "Not enough," she replied. She moved to a small table and pulled out a tin of cartridges, feeding them into her rifle with mechanical precision. I set the oilskin bundle on the table. "What's in it?" Her eyes cut to mine. "You haven't looked. It's not mine." She gave a humorless laugh. "That's the first honest thing I've heard all day." She unwrapped it with careful fingers. Inside was a single folded sheet, thicker than normal paper, covered in ink lines and faded stains. It wasn't a town map, or a cattle route. It was a section of desert marked with a jagged black X, and the faded words, Redwater Hollow. My stomach tightened. "There's nothing in Redwater Hollow." "That's what they want you to think," Nora said. "But underneath, there's a vault. Older than any of us. And whatever's inside it," she trailed off, eyes hard. "Men kill for less." Before I could speak, a shout carried down the gully. We froze. "They found us," she said. I grabbed my revolver. Nora moved to the back wall, kicked aside a pile of crates, and pried up a trapdoor. Down. The space beneath was barely big enough for the two of us, dark and smelling of damp earth. She pulled the hatch shut above us just as boots pounded outside. Through the cracks, I saw shadows moving in the shack. Voices, low, harsh. Someone kicked the table, sending the map skidding across the floor. A man's voice. "It's here. I can smell her." Another. "The tall man wants them alive." "Not my problem," the first replied. Gunfire erupted above. Not aimed at us, yet, but close enough to rattle dirt into my hair. I could hear Nora's breathing, steady, controlled. Mine was louder. Then, silence. The trapdoor ripped open. A gloved hand reached down, grabbed my coat, and hauled me up into the light. I hit the floor hard, my revolver skidding away. The man who'd pulled me out was taller than me by a head, his face wrapped in black cloth. Behind him, 3 more filled the doorway, blocking the fading sun. "Where's the woman?" the tall one asked. "Right here," Nora said, stepping from behind a stack of crates with her rifle leveled at his chest. He smiled, or at least his eyes did. "You won't shoot. You willing to test that?" she asked. One of his men moved. She fired. The crack was deafening in the small space. He dropped without a sound. Everything blurred after that. Shouts, boots on wood, the sharp tang of gunpowder. I lunged for my revolver and fired at the closest shape. He spun away, clutching his side. Nora grabbed the bundle, shoving it back into my coat. "Run!" We burst out the shack's rear door into the falling dusk, scrambling uphill through brush that clawed at our clothes. Bullets snapped past us. Somewhere behind, a man was screaming. By the time we crested the ridge, my lungs were on fire. We didn't stop. We ran until the gully and the shack were far behind, and the only sounds were our own gasps and the night wind rising from the desert. Finally, Nora slowed. "They won't stop," she said. "Not until they've got the map. Or us." I stared at her in the dim light. "So what's the play?" Her gaze turned south, toward the dark horizon. "We get to Redwater Hollow first. And then, she said, we find out if the stories are true." Somewhere behind us, in the darkness, a single rifle shot cracked the night. Nora didn't look back. Neither did I. The smoke hadn't cleared yet when I realized how quiet it had become. Not peaceful quiet, just the kind where every man is holding his breath, listening for the next move. From up on the ridge, No more shots came. The air hung heavy with dust, the smell of black powder clinging to the back of my throat. The marked were scattered among the rocks and sagebrush, horses snorting nervously, eyes rolling. The tall man sat on his mount as if carved from stone, watching the slope with that same blade-thin smile. Whoever was up there had bought me time. That was all. Time runs out fast in the West. Holden. Elias's voice was low, almost a growl. You know who that is. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't, not without sounding like a lunatic. My eyes stayed on the ridge, searching for any flicker of movement. I think I do, I finally said. Elias snorted. And I suppose it's someone who owes you a favor. 'Cause if they're aiming to save your hide, they better have an army in their pocket. The tall man raised a hand, and two of his riders dismounted. They began creeping toward the slope, rifles in hand, scanning the ridgeline like hounds catching a scent. I felt my stomach knot. The shooter, if it was who I thought, wouldn't have the luxury of distance for long. Then, like a whisper carried on wind, a single shot cracked. One of the riders dropped to his knees, clawing at his chest before collapsing into the dust. The other froze for half a second too long. Another shot, and he spun backward, his rifle flying from his grip. She's picking him off, I muttered. Elias gave me a sharp look. She. I didn't have time to explain. The tall man's voice cut through the murmurs. Bring me that ridge. I want the rocks, the sage, and whoever's hiding in it. The marked surged forward in small clusters, using what cover they could find. More shots came from above, but fewer now, measured, deliberate. She wasn't wasting ammunition. Still, the numbers were too heavy. They'd close the gap soon. I felt the paper in my coat like it was burning through the fabric. If the marked got their hands on it, whatever came next wouldn't matter. I had to move. Elias, I said, you got a rifle? His eyes narrowed. Why? Because I'm going up there. Like hell you are, he snapped. You stick your head up that ridge, you'll get it blown clean off. I didn't bother arguing. My boots were already carrying me toward the back of the barn, using the wagon wheel and stacked crates for cover. Behind me, I heard Elias curse, then follow. We stayed low, weaving through the dry grass. Bullets whined overhead, kicking up little puffs of dirt. My breath came hard and fast, but my focus locked on the ridge. I could almost see her. Dark hair, sharp eyes, that calm way she held a rifle like it was just another limb. But that was impossible. She'd been gone 4 years. Halfway to the ridge, we ducked behind a boulder, catching our breath. Elias peeked out, then jerked back as a slug chipped the rock near his face. They've spotted us, he said. Good, I replied. Means we're close. We made another run, keeping to the shadows of the rocks until we reached the base of the slope. The ground rose steep and dry, littered with loose stones that threatened to slide under our boots. Above, I caught the flash of a rifle barrel between two boulders. I cupped my hands around my mouth. You're a hard woman to find. For a moment, nothing. Then, a voice I thought I'd never hear again. Holden Ross. I should have let them shoot you. I almost laughed, but another round of gunfire from below snapped me back. We scrambled up the slope until we were close enough to see her clearly. She hadn't changed much. Still that same fierce stare, though there were new lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind carved by long miles and hard years. Mara, I said, breathless. You're supposed to be dead. Supposed to be, she replied, sliding another round into her Winchester without looking at me. Turns out I'm bad at following orders. Below us, the marked were closing in, fanning out along the slope. Mara sighted down the rifle and squeezed the trigger. A man tumbled backward, his hat spinning off into the air. I assume you brought trouble with you, she said. Not on purpose. That makes it worse. She handed me a spare rifle, the kind of gesture that carried more trust than her words ever would. They want the paper, don't they? I stiffened. You know about it. I know enough. She fired again. And I know if they get it, we're all dead. Elias slid in beside us, panting, sweat streaking the dust on his face. We can't hold this ridge forever. No, Mara said, eyes still on the slope. But we can make them bleed for every inch. The next few minutes were nothing but gunfire, shouting, and the sharp ring of brass hitting stone. Every time a marked rider tried to push higher, one of us dropped him. But they kept coming. Like ants over a carcass, relentless and hungry. When Mara's rifle clicked empty, she reached for more rounds, and that's when I saw it. Her left hand shook, just slightly. Not from fear, but from something older, deeper. A wound maybe, or a sickness. I didn't ask. A shout rose from below. 3 of the marked had found a narrow gully on the far side, climbing fast under cover of rock. Mara turned her rifle toward them, but I was already moving. Sliding down the slope, I caught one in the chest before he could lift his pistol. The second swung a knife at me. I ducked, slammed the rifle stock into his jaw, felt bone give. The third got a shot off that grazed my shoulder before Elias dropped him with a bullet through the neck. By the time I scrambled back up, my arm was slick with blood, my breath ragged. Mara gave me one quick glance. That paper better be worth dying for. I thought about that. Thought about the man who'd given it to me in the dead of night, his eyes wide with fear. About the names scrawled on it, the places, the dates. And about the fact that if even half of it was true, the marked weren't just a gang. They were the tip of a knife aimed at the heart of the territory. It's worth more than that, I said. Down below, the tall man finally moved. He dismounted, passed the reins to one of his men, and began climbing toward us at a steady, unhurried pace. His coat flared with each step, the sunlight glinting off the pistol at his side. He didn't draw. He didn't need to. When he reached speaking distance, he stopped, eyes sweeping over the 3 of us. "You've got spirit," he said. "I'll give you that." Mara spat into the dust. "And you've got bad manners." He smiled that knife-thin smile again. "I'll take the paper now, Holden. Or I'll take it off your corpse." I raised the rifle, but his gaze pinned me like a nail. "Careful, boy. This isn't a fight you can win." Behind him, the rest of the marked were regrouping. I knew what was coming next, one last push, all at once. And I didn't know if the ridge would hold. The fire's light clawed at the sky, painting the canyon walls a deep, angry red. Smoke rolled over us, thick enough to burn the eyes and clog the throat. Somewhere in that choking haze, the marked were regrouping, their shouts cutting through the night like the echo of war drums. We had no time. "Move." Mara's voice was sharp, urgent. She kicked dirt over the dying embers of our campfire and shouldered her rifle. Elias was already cinching the last of the saddlebags onto my horse, his jaw set like a man who'd stopped caring about pain hours ago. The problem wasn't the fire, it was the sound it would draw. In the canyons, noise traveled farther than bullets, and now we'd lit up the dark like a lantern in a graveyard. "They're closing in," Mara said, squinting into the smoke. I counted 6 on the ridge before the flames took the view. "There'll be more behind them." "Then we run," I said. Elias gave a humorless snort. "Run. You know damn well they'll track us. Fire or no fire, we're already painted targets." "Better targets moving than dead ones standing," I shot back. We mounted up, the horses restless under the weight of panic. I kept one hand near my colt, the other tight on the reins, guiding the animal down the narrow path that curved away from the canyon floor. The fire's glow dimmed behind us, but the smell of charred wood clung to my clothes, a trail no hunter could miss. For 2 hours, we rode hard under a moon that seemed far too small for the size of the land it lit. The silence between us wasn't from exhaustion, it was calculation. We each had the same thought: how far could we get before dawn? It was Elias who broke it. "That paper," he said over the wind. "It worth all this?" My jaw tightened. "It's worth more than you'll ever understand." He muttered something, too low to catch. Mara glanced back at him, then at me, but said nothing. We reached the old rail bridge just before first light. It hadn't seen a train in years, the boards were rotting, the iron bolts rusted. But it was the only way across the gorge without adding 3 days to our trail. I dismounted and tested the planks. The wood creaked under my boot, but held. "Elias first," I said. "Why me?" His voice was defensive, tired. "Because if it breaks, I'd rather lose your weight than hers." His glare could have cut glass, but he stepped onto the bridge, his rifle strapped across his back. The horses snorted, uneasy. Mara waited beside me, scanning the hills. "We won't get far after this," she said. "They'll guess we went south. They always do. Let them guess wrong." Elias reached the midpoint of the bridge when the first shot cracked. It came from the west ridge, a sharp, deliberate report. The bullet hit the railing inches from Elias's shoulder, sending splinters into the air. He froze. "Go!" I yelled. But the second shot wasn't meant for him. It screamed past my ear and punched through the saddlebag on my horse, the one with the oilskin bundle inside. "Son of a—" I grabbed the reins and dove for cover behind one of the bridge supports. Mara dropped to one knee, rifle up, scanning the ridge for the glint of a scope. "They're trying to force us onto the bridge," she hissed. "Then we make them regret it." She fired once, twice, each shot echoing through the gorge. The return fire came fast, too fast for one shooter. At least 3 rifles, maybe 4. I crawled to Elias. "Get moving." But he wasn't looking at me. His gaze was locked on the far side of the bridge, where figures were stepping from the tree line. The marked. The first man carried a lever-action rifle, the black cloth tied tight around his bicep. The second dragged a chain behind him, the links clinking with every step. The sound alone made my stomach turn. It was the sound of men who didn't just kill, they collected. We were trapped. Shots from the ridge to our right, the marked blocking the far end of the bridge. The only way back was into the gorge, a drop that would kill a man before he hit the river. Elias's face went pale. "We can't fight both sides." "We don't have to fight both," Mara said, eyes cold. "Just one. Hard enough to make the other blink first." Her rifle barked again, and one of the ridge shooters vanished behind the rocks, wounded or dead. The man with the chain didn't flinch. He stepped onto the bridge, the iron links dragging behind him, scraping against the boards. His smile was too calm for a man walking into gunfire. I'd seen men like him before, the kind who believed they couldn't die. Sometimes they were right. "Mara," I said, "cover the ridge." "What about him?" "I'll handle him." I stepped onto the bridge, the board swaying slightly under my weight. The man stopped 20 feet away, the chain coiled loosely in his right hand. "You Holden?" he asked. "I am." "Then I'll make this easy." His voice was steady, almost kind. "You drop the paper, I let you walk." "Not a chance." His smile widened. "Then you won't walk at all." The chain snapped up like a snake, the weighted end whistling through the air. I ducked, the metal grazing my shoulder. Pain flared, but I stayed on my feet, drawing the Colt and firing once. The bullet hit him in the thigh, but he didn't drop. Didn't even curse. "That all you got?" he growled. The chain came again, this time wrapping around my wrist. The weight pulled my arm down hard, nearly wrenching the Colt from my grip. I twisted, the metal biting into my skin, and yanked back with everything I had. He stumbled forward. I stepped in, drove my boot into his knee, and heard something pop. He roared, but the chain didn't let go. Another shot from the ridge punched into the boards between us. The bridge swayed. Mara shouted, "Holden! Now!" I planted my feet, pulled hard on the chain, and when he lurched toward me, I jammed the Colt under his ribs and fired twice. He collapsed, the links spilling from his hand, clattering against the wood. But there was no time to breathe. The marked on the far side were moving in, and the ridge fire hadn't stopped. "Mara! Elias! Off the bridge!" I yelled. We ran, bullets chasing us across the boards. One ricocheted off the railing and sliced a burning line across my cheek. When we hit solid ground, I turned and fired at the bridge supports. The old wood was dry, brittle, and the iron bolts groaned under the impact. Mara understood before Elias did. She grabbed a lantern from her saddlebag, smashed it against the nearest beam, and the flames took hold fast. The marked hesitated, trapped on the bridge as the fire climbed. We mounted up, turned south, and didn't look back. By the time the bridge collapsed into the gorge, their screams were lost to the roar of the river below. The sun was sinking, bleeding gold and red across the ridgeline. The wind carried a dry, whistling song through the broken boards of the barn, a tune as hollow as the silence that followed it. We had buried Jonah 3 hours ago, though it felt like a lifetime. The shovel was still leaning against the barn wall, a reminder of how quick the earth can close over a man. Cass didn't say a word through the whole thing. She just drove the blade into the ground, over and over, her shoulders trembling but her eyes dry. Now she sat on the old milking stool, oiling her rifle, the slow, careful strokes of the rag the only sign she was still with us. Elias was in the corner, counting rounds from a dented tin box. And me, well, I just stood by the doorway, staring at the tracks in the dust outside. The marked had pulled back after the skirmish at the creek. That didn't mean they'd gone far. No, they were out there, watching, waiting for the right shadow to fall so they could move in again. Cass finally broke the silence. They won't wait long. I turned to her. How do you know? Because I wouldn't. She slid the oiled rifle into its scabbard. They've already lost 1 man to me. That means they'll come twice as hard next time. Elias spat into the dirt. Or they'll wait for us to run out of food and water. I shook my head. No. The tall man, he wants the paper too bad. He won't risk someone else getting it before him. Cass's eyes flicked to me, sharp. What's on it? That was the question I'd been dodging since the day I found it. I wanted to tell her, but the words wouldn't come, because saying them out loud would make it real. And once it was real, it would be worth killing for. Instead, I said, it's something they can't have. Her jaw tightened. You think I'm gonna fight for something I don't understand? You're already fighting, I said. That shut her up, but not in a way that made me feel any better. We spent the next hour boarding up the barn windows, stacking bales of hay against the weak spots in the walls. It was makeshift cover, but it was all we had. Elias kept muttering about how the place was a death trap, but neither of us paid him much mind. By nightfall, the desert had turned cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes your trigger finger stiff. We took turns on watch, Cass first, then me, then Elias. It was during my watch that I saw it. A flicker of movement near the tree line, too slow to be a rabbit, too deliberate to be the wind. My hand went to the Colt, and I narrowed my eyes. The moonlight caught something. Metal, maybe. A glint. I signaled Cass, who was lying on a bedroll in the corner. She was on her feet in seconds, rifle in hand. We slipped outside, staying low, moving from shadow to shadow. The glint came again, but closer this time. And then I heard it, breathing. Not mine, not hers. Ragged, shallow, like a man who'd been running for days. We came around the side of the barn, and there he was. A boy. No older than 16, clutching a revolver that looked too heavy for him. His face was pale under the dirt, his eyes wild with something between fear and fury. "Stay back," he barked, though his voice cracked halfway through. Cass raised an eyebrow. "You lost, kid." "I ain't a kid." He tightened his grip on the revolver, but his hands were shaking. "They're comin'. The ones with the black cloth. They killed my pa." My stomach sank. "Where?" "Old Mill. 2 miles east." He glanced over his shoulder like he expected them to appear right then. "They'll be here soon. Said they was lookin' for a man named Holden." Cass's eyes slid to me. "You're gettin' popular." Before I could reply, the boy stumbled forward. His revolver clattered to the dirt, and he collapsed. Blood darkened his shirt, spreading fast from a wound just under the ribs. Cass dropped to her knees, pressing her hand to the wound, but the boy's lips were already turning blue. "Don't talk," she said. But he did. His voice was a whisper now. "They got the map." My blood went cold. "What map?" Cass asked. He tried to speak again, but his breath rattled, and then, nothing. His head lolled to the side. Cass swore under her breath, wiping her bloody hands on her trousers. "Map to what?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because I knew exactly what map he meant. And if they had it, "They'll be here," I said quietly. "Tonight." Cass's eyes narrowed. "Then we make tonight hell for them." We dragged the boy's body into the barn, covering him with a tarp. Elias didn't even look up from where he was cleaning his rifle. He'd seen too many bodies to count. Cass and I took positions near the north window, where the tree line met the open ground. The moon was bright enough to paint everything silver, but shadows still clung to the edges of the barn like old scars. Hours passed. My eyes burned from staring into the dark, waiting for something to move. And then, it did. A line of riders, moving slow, silent. The tall man at the front, his gray eyes fixed on the barn. Cass breathed in through her nose, out through her mouth, steadying herself. "You take the left. I'll take the right." I nodded. The riders spread out, fanning into a crescent. They weren't charging. Not yet. They were waiting for something. Then I saw it. In the moonlight, behind them, a wagon. Covered but sagging under the weight of something heavy. And chained to the back was a man. Even from this distance, I recognized him. It was my brother. And I'd buried him 5 years ago. The moon hung high and cruel, casting long shadows over the cracked earth as the wagon rolled closer, creaking under its burden. My heart hammered against my ribs, loud enough, I thought, to drown out the whisper of the wind. The man chained to the back was unmistakable. Dust-covered and ragged, but his eyes, those haunted, hollow eyes, stared back at me, unblinking and filled with a pain I thought I'd never see again. It was Thomas. My brother. I staggered back, disbelief freezing me for a heartbeat. How? Why? He had died 5 years ago, lost in the same chaos that tore our family apart. But here he was, alive, but broken like a piece of driftwood battered by storms. Cass gripped my arm, pulling me toward the window. "We don't have much time," she hissed. "We need a plan." I swallowed hard, trying to gather the pieces in my racing mind. The marked, these marauders who haunted the desert like ghosts, had him. And they wanted something from me. Why bring him here? I muttered. What do they want? Cass's eyes were sharp. To break you. To make you beg. To show you what's at stake. Outside, the riders dismounted with fluid, practiced motions. The tall man, their leader, stepped from the shadows, his pale face set in a cruel smile. He glanced up at the barn and then toward the back of the wagon. "We have your brother," he said, voice cold and steady. "And the map you seek." The map. The cursed map. It was the key to everything. Buried treasures, lost secrets, the kind of power that corrupted every man who laid eyes on it. I'd found fragments of it buried deep in my family's past but never dreamed the marked would come after it with such bloodthirsty determination. "Bring him to the front," the leader commanded, and 2 of his men obeyed, hauling Thomas forward by his chains. Cass crouched lower, whispering urgently, "We're outnumbered and outgunned. The only chance is a distraction." I nodded, reaching into my jacket pocket where I kept a bundle of old dynamite sticks, left over from a long-forgotten mining operation. If we could blow the wagon to hell, we might turn the tide. But the risk was huge. The leader barked an order, and my blood ran cold. "Start the fire." One of the men uncorked a bottle of whiskey, splashing it over the wagon's wooden frame. Flames caught quickly in the dry desert air, licking hungrily at the sides. "Now," Cass said, eyes burning. I pulled the fuse from my pocket and lit it, the small spark hissing in the darkness. I lobbed it toward the wagon's wheel. The explosion was deafening, a blast that shook the earth and sent a plume of dust and fire skyward. Chaos erupted. The marked scattered, shouting orders and scrambling to control the flames. Cass and I bolted from the barn, guns blazing, catching a few of them off guard. Thomas lay still, coughing and blinking through the smoke. I raced to his side, dropping to my knees. "Brother," I whispered. His lips moved, weak and trembling. "Get the map." I gritted my teeth, pulling off his chains with trembling hands. "We will." The leader reappeared, fury carved into his face. "You think this ends here?" Cass aimed, but I grabbed her wrist. "Not yet." The desert was alive with danger, but I had no choice. We had to find the map before they did. Before everything we knew was lost forever. The fire's glow faded behind us, leaving a thick veil of smoke that swallowed the horizon. Thomas leaned heavily on me as we moved away from the ruins, the pain in his eyes deepening. Every step felt like a battle, but there was no turning back. Cass scanned the darkness ahead, every muscle tense. "We need to find shelter, and fast. The marked won't give up, not after what we just did." I nodded, pushing through the ache in my legs. My mind raced with questions, none with easy answers. How had Thomas survived all these years? Who else was involved in this dangerous game? And most importantly, where was that map hidden? We found refuge in an abandoned mine shaft carved into the jagged cliffs. The air inside was stale and cold, but it was safe, for now. I helped Thomas settle against the rough stone wall while Cass checked the perimeter. His breathing was shallow. "You don't know everything," he rasped. "There's more, deeper than the map." "What do you mean?" I asked, heart pounding. Thomas's eyes flickered with pain and fear. "The map leads to something old. Something powerful. The kind of power men die chasing." Cass returned, lowering her voice. "We're not alone. I spotted movement out there, marks scouting the area." A cold chill ran down my spine. We had a target on our backs and little time to prepare. Thomas coughed violently, clutching his side. "You must finish this. Protect the secret. Promise me." I took his hand, voice firm despite the tremble inside. "I swear it." Suddenly, a sharp noise echoed through the mine. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, closing in fast. Cass drew her revolver, whispering, "Get ready." A shadow flickered in the dim light. Then two figures stepped into the shaft, faces grim but not hostile. "We're here to help," one said quietly. "Name's Elena. We're part of a group opposing the marked." Relief mixed with suspicion. Alliances in this land were fragile and often deadly. But for now, we had no choice but to trust. Elena and her companion helped patch Thomas's wounds and shared what little intel they had. The marked were searching for a hidden relic said to grant control over the desert itself, a weapon from an ancient time, lost to legend but deadly real. The map was the key, scattered across several locations, each piece more dangerous to reach than the last. "Our time's running out," Elena warned. "If the marked get their hands on it all, nothing will stop them." The weight of destiny settled on my shoulders. This wasn't just about saving my brother anymore. It was about stopping a darkness that could consume everything. As dawn approached, we prepared to move deeper into the wilderness, chasing shadows and secrets in a land where trust was scarce and survival uncertain. The first pale light of dawn seeped through the jagged cracks of the mine shaft, painting the dust motes in a ghostly glow. We moved quietly, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on each step. Thomas, still weak but driven by some fierce will to survive, insisted on coming with us. His presence was a tether to the past, but also a glaring reminder of what was at stake. Elena's group was small but efficient, 3 others besides her and me, each hardened by their own battles against the marked. Their knowledge of the terrain and guerrilla tactics was impressive, but the desert was vast and unforgiving. We couldn't afford to waste a single moment. We set off toward the next point marked on the map, a remote valley known among the old tribes as the Whispering Hollow. According to ancient lore, it was a place where the wind carried voices from long dead, a sacred site rumored to guard one of the map's fragments. The journey was brutal. The sun climbed mercilessly, beating down on us with blistering intensity. Our water supplies dwindled rapidly. Thomas's breathing grew more labored, each cough racking his frail frame. But the deeper we pressed into the wilderness, the more I felt the pull of something bigger than myself. At night, around the campfire, Elena shared stories of her own past, how the Marked had shattered her family, how she'd vowed vengeance not just for herself but for every innocent caught in their crossfire. Her eyes, hard as flint, reflected the flickering flames and a soul tempered by loss and determination. Despite the grim reality, moments of quiet camaraderie bloomed, a shared joke, a rare laugh, the comfort of knowing we weren't alone. But beneath it all, the tension remained thick, as if the desert itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable storm. Finally, after days of treacherous travel, we reached the edge of Whispering Hollow. The valley stretched before us like a jagged wound in the earth, dotted with ancient stone monoliths covered in faded glyphs and carvings. The air was cooler here, but carried an eerie stillness that set my nerves on edge. We began the search at first light, combing through caves and crevices, following the map's cryptic clues. Hours passed with little progress until Elena's sharp eyes caught a glint beneath a collapsed stone slab. Together, we pried it loose, revealing a weathered wooden box sealed with iron bands. Inside lay the fragment, a small carved stone tablet etched with symbols that hummed faintly with some hidden energy. Holding it, I felt a strange warmth spread through my hands, as if the relic itself was alive. But no sooner had we uncovered it than the ground beneath us trembled, a distant rumble growing rapidly into a roar. From the cliffs above, dark shapes began descending, marked warriors, faster and more numerous than we'd anticipated. Elena cursed under her breath, drawing her blade. "We've been followed. They knew we were coming." There was no time to think. We grabbed the fragment and fled into the twisting paths of the valley, the howls of pursuit echoing behind us. The Marked were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. During the chase, Thomas faltered, pain ripping through him. I dropped to help him, desperation clawing at my throat. But Elena shook her head sharply. "We can't stop. They'll catch us all." With a heavy heart, I helped Thomas to his feet, steeling myself. We pressed onward through thickets and rocky ledges, adrenaline dulling the exhaustion. Suddenly, the path opened into a hidden cavern, its entrance obscured by hanging vines and shadows. We slipped inside, heartbeats pounding loud in the suffocating darkness. The Marked halted at the cavern's mouth, snarling and shouting threats. We were trapped, the walls close and cold. Then the air shifted. The relic in my hand pulsed stronger, filling the chamber with a soft light. The ancient glyphs on the walls began to glow, illuminating a hidden mural that told a story of an age-old power, meant to be guarded by the worthy. A quiet voice echoed in my mind, words I didn't recognize but somehow understood. The bearer of the fragment must prove their heart's truth to unlock the path forward. My breath caught. Was this a test? Could the legends be true? Before I could respond, the leader of the Marked stepped into the cavern, a cruel smile on his scarred face. "Hand over the fragment, and I might spare your lives." I gripped the stone tighter, feeling its warmth steady me. "No," I said, voice steady despite the fear twisting in my gut. The confrontation was inevitable. But deep inside, beneath the desert's harsh sun and the weight of destiny, something in me was awakening, a strength I never knew I had. As the Marked charged, I stepped forward, the relic glowing brighter, the cavern responding to my resolve. The battle for the future of this land had only just begun. The cavern erupted into chaos. The Marked surged forward, their twisted forms illuminated by the relic's eerie glow. But as they advanced, the ancient symbols carved into the cavern walls flared to life, casting shimmering barriers that pulsed with protective energy. I felt the power course through me, a sudden surge of clarity and strength that defied explanation. The relic wasn't just a piece of stone, it was a beacon, a key to something far greater than the battle raging around us. Elena fought fiercely beside me, her blade cutting through shadows and flesh with deadly precision. The other members of our group flanked us, their weapons flashing in the dim light. But even as we held the line, it was clear the marked were unlike any enemy we had faced before. Relentless, cunning, and driven by a dark force that seemed to feed on chaos. The leader snarled, launching himself toward me with a guttural roar. Our weapons clashed, steel against claw, sparks flying as the cavern trembled with the force of our blows. The relic pulsed in my hand, reacting to my will, sending waves of light that pushed back the darkness. "Focus!" Elena shouted, deflecting an attack from behind. "The relic is our strength, but it can't protect us forever." I nodded, channeling all my energy into the stone. The glowing glyphs on the walls shifted, forming patterns that I somehow understood. Ancient instructions, a map within a map. With a surge of determination, I pressed the relic against the cavern wall. The ground shook violently, and a hidden door slid open, revealing a narrow passage bathed in a golden light. "This is it," Elena said, her voice a mix of awe and urgency. "The path forward." The marked hesitated, snarling in frustration, but the power of the cavern held them at bay. We slipped through the opening, hearts pounding, leaving the chaos behind. The passage twisted deep beneath the earth, walls lined with inscriptions telling stories of forgotten heroes and battles long past. The air was thick with history, and as we moved forward, the relic's glow illuminated a mural of a great war between light and shadow, a struggle mirroring our own. At the passage's end, we found a chamber unlike any other, an ancient sanctuary filled with artifacts, weapons, and scrolls. But most striking was a pedestal holding a glowing crystal, radiating warmth and light. "The heart of the desert," Elena whispered. "The source of the relic's power." As I reached out to touch the crystal, a voice echoed in my mind, clearer now, commanding yet kind. "Only the worthy may wield this power to restore balance." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over me. The battle wasn't just for survival, it was for the future of all who called this land home. Suddenly, the cavern trembled once more. The marked had regrouped, their fury unyielding. With the heart of the desert in hand, I felt a new resolve. This was our moment, to fight, to protect, and to claim hope from the shadows. The cavern trembled with the fury of the marked as they surged toward us once more, their howls echoing through the ancient halls like a storm of rage and despair. Clutching the heart of the desert, I felt its warmth seep into my veins, flooding me with a power unlike anything I had ever known. It was as if the land itself was lending me its strength, a fierce, unyielding force that made my limbs move with supernatural precision. Elena stood beside me, eyes blazing with determination. Around us, the remaining warriors rallied, their faces pale but resolute. The air crackled with anticipation. This was the moment we either turned the tide or lost everything. The marked crashed into our defenses like a tidal wave, claws and teeth rending the air, their twisted forms writhing in a grotesque dance of death. But the light from the heart of the desert flared brightly, pushing back the darkness with a blinding radiance. The glyphs on the cavern walls shimmered and pulsed in harmony, weaving a protective lattice that shielded us from the worst of the onslaught. I could hear the chants of our ancestors rising in my mind, their voices a chorus urging me forward. The power of the relic was not just a weapon, it was a beacon of hope, a symbol of the enduring spirit of this land and its people. With a cry that tore through the chaos, I raised the heart high, its light exploding outward in a wave that knocked the marked off their feet. Shadows fled before the brilliance, their forms dissolving into nothingness like mist under the morning sun. The ground shook as the cavern itself seemed to awaken, the very stones humming with ancient energy. But victory was not yet assured. From the depths of the darkness emerged the shadow wraith, a towering figure cloaked in living night, eyes burning like molten gold. It was the source of the mark's corruption, the malevolent force that had spread blight across the desert. The wraith's voice was a cold whisper that echoed in every corner of the chamber. "You dare challenge me, mortal? This land belongs to darkness, and you will fall beneath its shadow." Elena stepped forward, her sword gleaming with light, but I knew this battle was mine to fight. The heart thrummed in my grasp, a steady heartbeat syncing with my own. I met the wraith's gaze, feeling the crushing weight of its power, yet beneath it all, I sensed a flicker of something forgotten. Hope, defiance, the spark of light that no darkness could truly extinguish. Summoning every ounce of strength, I called upon the relic's power, channeling it through my body and into a beam of pure energy that shot forth like a comet. The wraith roared, staggering under the assault, but it was far from defeated. The battle raged on, a furious clash of light and shadow that shook the very foundations of the world. The chamber cracked and splintered, ancient runes glowing brighter with each strike. Around us, the warriors fought with renewed vigor, their spirits lifted by the hope we embodied. Elena's blade danced through the darkness, cutting down the lesser creatures with deadly grace. In that moment, I understood the true purpose of the heart of the desert. It was not merely a weapon, but a bridge between worlds, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, the light of courage and unity could shine through. With a final, desperate surge, I unleashed the full power of the relic. The cavern was bathed in a blinding light that shattered the wraith's form, sending ripples of energy that healed the blighted earth around us. Silence fell, heavy and profound. We had won. But as the dust settled, I knew this victory was just the beginning. The desert still held secrets, and the bonds forged in battle would be tested in the days to come. Elena turned to me, a weary but triumphant smile on her lips. "We did it. We did," I replied, feeling the weight of the journey yet to come. Outside, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the desert in hues of gold and crimson. The land was waking, reborn from the shadow, and with it, so were we. The first light of dawn stretched across the horizon, casting long shadows that crept over the scarred earth like silent witnesses to the night's brutal battle. The desert was still, ominously quiet, as if holding its breath after the storm. The air smelled of dust and smoldering fire, and the echoes of clashing steel and guttural cries lingered faintly in my mind. Elena and I stood at the cavern's mouth, surveying the aftermath. Around us, the warriors moved with weary determination, tending to wounds, gathering the fallen, and repairing their gear. Their faces were etched with exhaustion but also with a flicker of hope that hadn't been there before, a hope born from survival, from victory against a darkness that had threatened to consume us all. The heart of the desert pulsed softly in my pack, its warmth a steady reminder of the power we had unleashed, and the responsibility it carried. But even as relief settled over us, unease gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. The battle might have been won, but the war was far from over. Takakota's words echoed back to me, the stakes were higher than any of us realized. Ayana's disappearance was not an isolated incident but part of a larger web of betrayal and ambition that threatened to unravel the delicate balance between tribes, and between old ways and new. "Have you seen any sign of Ayana?" I asked Elena, my voice low. She shook her head. "Nothing yet. But the enemy's retreat doesn't mean she's safe." We knew that the enemy wasn't just external. The wounds within Takakota's tribe ran deep. The traitors who had orchestrated the ambush were still out there, hidden among their own people, waiting for their moment to strike. The thought chilled me. As the warriors gathered for a council, Takakota approached, his face a mask of resolve and weariness. His eyes met mine, unspoken understanding passing between us. "We must move quickly," he said. "The longer Ayana remains missing, the greater the risk to our people, and to her life." His voice carried the weight of a father's desperation, a leader's burden. Plans were drawn, maps unfolded, and scouts dispatched to scour the surrounding lands. Each trail held potential clues, but none had yielded answers yet. Days stretched into nights filled with restless sleep and whispered fears. In the meantime, I found myself grappling with my own place in this unfolding saga. I was a stranger to these lands, to their people and customs, yet here I was, entrusted with their hopes, drawn into a world of ancient loyalties and brutal power struggles. Elena remained a constant by my side, her presence a steadying force amid the chaos. One evening, as the sun dipped below the distant hills, painting the sky with strokes of purple and orange, I sat beside the campfire, staring into the flames. Memories of that stormy night, the jacket, the desperate eyes of Ayana, the silent warriors lining my fence, flooded back. How had a simple act of kindness spiraled into this maelstrom of danger and intrigue? I shook my head, unwilling to dwell on what-ifs. The path ahead was clear: find Ayana, expose the traitors, and protect a future that balanced on a knife's edge. Suddenly, a scout returned, breathless and wide-eyed. "Chief, we found signs, a campfire recently extinguished, tracks leading north." Takakota nodded grimly. "Then we ride at first light." As the warriors prepared for the journey, I felt a mixture of fear and determination tightening my chest. We were chasing shadows, but every step brought us closer to the truth, and to the heart of the conspiracy threatening to consume us all. The desert awaited, vast and unforgiving, but so did our resolve. Together, we would face whatever darkness lurked in its depths. The sun was a ruthless overseer, beating down mercilessly as our weary column pressed forward through the endless, unforgiving desert. Every grain of sand seemed to whisper of betrayals, lost hopes, and the weight of decisions made in the shadows. But beneath that oppressive sky, something fiercer than the heat burned inside me: the unyielding fire of resolve. We were close. The trail of broken branches, scorched earth, and faint footprints led us to a jagged outcropping, the last known refuge of those who dared to hold Ayana captive. The air was thick with tension, thick enough to suffocate even the strongest spirit. Takakota rode ahead with the quiet authority of a man who bore the hopes of his people on his shoulders. Elena flanked me, her eyes sharp, her presence steady as the desert winds. This was no longer just a rescue mission. This was a reckoning. The betrayal had cut deeper than any blade. Kichi's treachery had shattered trust, and the shadow of Akachita's vendetta loomed larger than ever. They had weaponized Ayana's very existence, turning her into a pawn in a deadly game of power. But we had one advantage: our unity and the truth burning bright like a beacon against the gathering darkness. The enemy was entrenched, hidden in the maze of canyons and crags. Takakota's warriors moved silently, their footsteps in perfect harmony, hearts pounding in rhythm with the pulse of the land. We had rehearsed every step, every signal, but the danger was palpable. One misstep could mean death for all of us. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the stillness. The ambush was upon us. Arrows rained like deadly rain, cutting through the air with lethal precision. Warriors dropped on both sides, screams and war cries tearing the silence apart. But we held our ground. I caught sight of Ayana, her fierce eyes blazing with defiance despite the grime and bruises. She was shackled, but her spirit was unbroken. "Hold the line," Takakota roared, his voice carrying over the chaos. I felt Elena beside me, pulling a hidden dagger, her movements fluid and deadly. Together, we pushed forward, breaking through the enemy's lines with a ferocity born of desperation. The battle twisted and turned like a storm unleashed. Kichi appeared, his face a mask of rage and regret. He lunged toward Takakota, but Elena intercepted, her blade flashing in the sunlight. The fight was brutal, raw, a clash not just of weapons, but of wills. With a cry that tore through the air, Takakota overcame Kichi, binding him as a prisoner of his own treason. As the dust settled, I raced toward Ayana, cutting her bonds with trembling hands. "Are you hurt?" I asked, breathless. Her gaze locked onto mine, fierce and unwavering. "I'm stronger than you think," she replied. Together, we climbed from the depths of that canyon, each step a triumph over fear and doubt. Back at the camp, the air was thick with a mix of relief and sorrow. The cost had been high, lives lost, trust broken, but Ayana was safe. Takakota approached me, gratitude and respect shining in his eyes. "You saved my daughter and my people," he said. "You are no longer just a stranger here." I nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle deep within me. In that moment, I understood, this was more than a rescue. It was the forging of a bond, between two worlds, two cultures, and two souls who had found strength in each other's courage. As the desert sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with fiery streaks of red and gold, I knew that life here would never be the same. But neither would I. The jacket I'd given Ayana, once a simple gesture, had become a symbol of something far greater. A promise of kindness, of loyalty, and of the unbreakable ties forged in the face of darkness. And as the stars emerged, cold and distant yet eternal, I made a silent vow. No matter what storms might come, I would stand. For Ayana, for Takakota's tribe, and for the fragile hope that one day, we might build a future together. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness spark the fiercest fires. And those fires can change the world. If you were in his shoes, would you fight the same battle? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your side of the story. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed this journey, and explore the other videos on screen for more incredible tales. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.